Welcome to Worth It. I'm your host, Lonnie Buse, on this network, Hypno 24/7 Live. So today I have with me Dr. Suzanne Lawry. She is a clinical psychologist who brings her passion for addressing the imposter phenomenon from her current roles as a therapist, clinical supervisor, educator, and consultant. She trained with Dr. Pauline Clance, who both uncovered the concept and developed the original Clance imposter phenomenon scale. Dr. Lawry is particularly interested in the intersection of imposter phenomenon, burnout, and social justice, which I want to talk to her more about. She has served as chair of the Women's Division of the Georgia Psychological Association, where she is a lifetime fellow, and received the President's Award for her work on marriage equality. She teaches at Georgia State University as a private practice in Atlanta, where she provides therapy for individuals and couples, professional supervision for therapists, and consultation to a wide range of organizations and institutions. So welcome to Worth It, Dr. Lawry. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. So first, I want to get a little understanding of how you got interested in this whole imposter phenomenon in the first place.
Okay. Well, I came to Atlanta to get my PhD in clinical psychology, and I got near finishing that and thought, uh-oh, I'm not competent. I'm not able to do this. Let me go do a second one. So I did a second one, and thank goodness my second one actually had Dr. Pauline Clance as my chair, and she was the person that kind of uncovered this phenomenon in the first place and said, Suzanne, you don't need to have PhDs, you're done. So anyway, so I got to it after a long time of graduate school, and a fantastic mentor who just the universe combined and put me in her lap, or I might have 3 or 4 PhDs by this time. So anyway, that's how I got here.
Can you explain a little bit about your own process? Because obviously, you mentioned having this phenomenon. So how did you exhibit those kind of symptoms or signs of it yourself?
Well, I felt like I just needed. I'm a psychologist, and I was in training. So in school, I would, which is pretty typical of. Well, there's kind of 2 types, but I would, overstudy, overthink, over-research. Pauline, with my dissertation, she said, you cannot read any more articles. You have to start writing. Just like there's this one thing out there that if I just read a little bit more, and so that's kind of it. It just kind of I was busting the curve. I didn't need to. I could back it on down way, and I would still be meeting excellent standards, right? So that's how it was for me. Is that I was just trying too hard.
I relate to that. So
right.
How did you? And was it with her guidance that helped you kind of shift out of that, or was it just like stop doing that, do this instead?
Right. Well, I mean, it's I get aware of when we start talking about kind of what you can do about it. Some of it is about you get aware of what you do and figure out ways that you can do a whole lot less and still have the achievement standards you want. And it gives you some room to have a life and have, some fun and some relaxation. So, and nothing bad happens. I mean, that's the trick with it, is that there's this mystique that Pauline calls it there's a cycle, an imposter phenomenon cycle. And we can kind of walk through that cycle. But part of why people don't kind of keep it going is that there's this kind of superstition that I have to do it this way or everything's going to fall apart. So I felt like I had to read every single thing and highlight every single thing and make outlines for everything, and before I could start. So there's it's kind of like a baseball player who feels like he has to eat fried chicken in order to do a good game, but then he never has a game without the fried chicken.
Yeah.
So it kind of stays like, so the overworking was a myth that I thought I had to do. And the piece with imposter phenomenon is that there's this other little voice that goes, other people don't have to work this hard. If you were really competent, you wouldn't have to work as hard. The fact that you're working hard is because you're not competent. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So kind of this loop, cyclical loop.
So it creates the loop. And if you never challenge that overworking, then you can walk around for 50 years with the feeling that you're incompetent because you've never done anything to kind of change it or test it out. So it's about experimenting and testing some things out. Like I remember the very last class I had in school, I didn't buy the book on purpose just to test it out. And, going to class, listening, taking notes, still got an A, so it's that kind of thing. I'm not suggesting all students go not buy the books, but
yeah, but sort of finding counter examples. Yeah.
Right. So it's those kinds of experiments. What if I make sure I get 8 hours of sleep no matter what? What if I make sure, once I read it, then I'm done. I don't have to reread it. And then when you find it doesn't really change your performance, then it's like, that was stress that I didn't need to walk around with.
Yeah. So in talking about that, or the work you did with Dr. Pauline Clance, can you tell me more about that? And basically her phenomenon scale that she created. Kind of what is that? What is it doing?
Sure. Yeah. Right. That's on open, that's public domain, I guess is the word I'm trying to think. That's public domain. So anybody can go on her website, paulineroseclance.com, and take it, and then score it, and it can tell you kind of where you land on the continuum. And what that is she, back in the 70s, she was faculty at Oberlin. And so she was working with these high-powered, really, really smart women, and they were very, very, really struggling with fears that someone's just going to find out that they really don't belong, that they're really not as smart as everybody else there, and just really worried and anxious about that, about not being good enough, and it's just a matter of time before someone's going to figure it out. And yet these were like people that had like really solid accomplishments. So we're not talking about frauds. Okay. We're not talking about people who, are in that position and really shouldn't be because they really don't know what they're doing. Right. These are people that have really solid histories that are, that their accomplishments are objective. There's no doubt. And they still have it. And so when she and Suzanne Imes coined the term impostor phenomenon back in 78, I think. And then in her book, she released the scale. And the scale is just kind of, it measures different things like how much of your success do you attribute to luck, or how much do you attribute to kind of external things? How much do you worry? So it's a scale now that has been translated all over the globe. It's in, I don't know how many languages, 15 or something like that. And so this phenomenon has been researched now for decades, and is it's a household name really, which is very unusual in academia. You study the gadgets of whatever and you come up with something and it just kind of stays in the ivory tower. But the imposter phenomenon has really lit up inside of all sorts of fields and in all different countries, because it's just so it's a common experience.
Yeah, it's from my understanding as well. Especially when you talk to more people about it, they might not know the name, but they're like, oh yeah, this is something I experienced. It's almost in some cases not always talked about,
Right. And it's much more talked about now than was in the 70s. Like I talked to Pauline, she was my mentor back then, and she's still my mentor. We still chat sometimes. And I asked her your question. You had said you might ask something about kind of what do you see changing over the time? And I thought, well, who would know better than that to that question than her? So I asked her, and she said, I think the biggest thing is that people talk about it now. She said, like, you have Michelle Obama talking about having it. It's like, it's not this secret thing. And back when she first was uncovering it, it was very shameful, secret, only in, very private spaces would these high-powered women say that they feel like they're a fraud. And I think it's been, there has been a lot written on it, and there has been a lot of conversation about it. And I think that has really helped it come out of the shadows. But you're right. Sometimes people still don't have the name for it. And so there's some relief when they go, oh, that's what it is. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's well beyond just like your kind of daily, like self-doubts and insecurities, and I think that sometimes people get, confused, like, oh, maybe this is just a normal, natural feeling. So can you explain that a little bit more as well?
Well, like insecurity is often about things we're not that great at, or, like, I'm okay, like here in a role. But if I met you at a party, I would be stumbling over my words. I'd be anxious because I'm not really that good at small talk with strangers, right? That's just not my thing. So I'm insecure about going into those places, but I'm not good at it, right? This is like saying, I'm not good at writing and I have 8 books and a writing award and 28 articles, right? But I'm bad at writing. So it's something that just doesn't match reality. Whereas insecurities often sort of match reality a little bit. Insecurities also are often more global, like kind of I'm not good at anything, or I'm not, but they're related. I mean, these terms, a lot of terms are related to this phenomenon. But I think where it contributed something really vital was that, in the 70s, when women were, breaking glass ceilings and, being able to name that experience of, wow, what I don't belong here. And, what is, somebody's just going to find out. The power of context has been a big old change over time. Looking at, like, for example, male nurses have it more than female nurses do. Why? Because the nursing field is predominantly female, right? It's not just a female experience, but females have a different, there's some mixed research on that, and that's actually some research I'm doing now to try to answer that question, because there's some equivocal. Some studies say there's no difference between the genders. Some say there is a lot more in women than men. There's not a lot out there that say in fact, there's nothing out there that says men have it more than women. So minorities have it a lot. So in part, the reason why women and minorities have more prevalence is because they are not only navigating their own demons, right, but they're also navigating being passed over for something, or a microaggression, or they're facing real discrimination that's happening to them, and it's really hard to not internalize that as I'm not good enough, because people are literally telling you you're not good enough. Oh, you're just not a leader, or oh, you're just not. And so they're having to navigate those real live oppressive things, as well as the internal voices, where men typically don't have that. They're expected to be the leader, they're expected to be the boss, they're expected to be the CEO. Where men get it, though, is they get messaging from their from the beginning, like, oh, here's a fire truck, play with your occupation. Your occupation is your definition, right? So if they don't succeed in their job, it puts a whole lot there. They have a lot of pressure to succeed in their job. So when they don't succeed, they get triggered by women get triggered by different things. They're imposter phenomenons. gets triggered by different things. I think that the other piece to know is that it's not either on or off. Like different transitions, like when you branch out into a new area of practice, or when maybe when you first started doing these interviews, or when you get called in to be an expert, like when you called me to talk to you, it's like, oh, I've got to prepare, and I was like, no, I'm not going to prepare until this morning. I'm just going to force myself, and I'm going to be fine. I don't need to do that.
Right.
But so when we get asked to be an expert, or when we get in a new job, or you become a manager, those transitions, it activates it. So that's, and knowing that it's kind of normative, and it kind of can help it, can help it recede too.
Right.
Not to get, it doesn't mean it's like, don't believe everything you think. Like you think it, but you don't, doesn't make it real.
Right. And that's, yeah, I mean, there's a lot there that you just mentioned, like the transitions, job transitions, or like being a factor, men having it as an identity, right? Like, job as their identity, and what that means if something doesn't kind of follow through on that.
Right.
And, contextual, male nurses, female nurses. And I think I read also somewhere, which makes sense, a lot of exchange students or international, like college students have it, right? Because they're also dealing with their internal dialogue, but also, external, voices or experiences of, being passed over and things like that you're mentioning.
So like, there's some interesting research on that, like Koreans in Korea versus Koreans that are students in the U.S. And the Koreans that are students in the U.S. have much higher levels of imposter phenomenon, because in the U.S. they are expected to be the model minority, and they're supposed to be good at science, and they're supposed to, there's all these stereotypes that they're having to navigate, right? And the reason why that's interesting is because one of the factors that certainly develops is what messages did you get about success in your family of origin, right? And so the collective culture and the value on education, for example, is the same in Korea and in the U.S., right? Or Koreans that come to the U.S., right? But there's it kind of normalizes it, not normalizes it, equalizes that, the family factor, and just kind of looks at that extra pressure of, what is it like to be in this context where, and today with also the messaging about immigrants and being here, and what does that mean? So, I think that is a certainly what has happened over the decades of research, is kind of looking at all of these the ideology from all kinds of places, from individual factors, from family factors, to workplace factors, to sociocultural factors.
Is there any other, knowledge that you're getting from all this research that you find kind of also fascinating? Because you're mentioning like you're working or going to start researching, male and female nurses. Or is there anything else, and you're talking about the Korean students, anything else that you're finding that's kind of like, oh, that's interesting?
See, my brain, I get excited about all kinds of things. Like, for example, Kevin Coakley in Texas is working, he works in with minority students in college settings, and his research is finding that the people with high imposter phenomenon, it moderates that relationship between experiences of racism and distress. So people of color in college settings are going to experience discrimination. Absolutely, it happens. If they also are struggling with imposter phenomenon, the impact of that same level of discrimination is worse. Makes sense? Yeah. So we're starting to see kind of where does it play, in the modeling of like cause and effect of things. Imposter phenomenon sometimes is in that middle place. There's also some interesting things, like, for example, when you when you hit a glass ceiling, if you internalize that reason, right, as opposed to staying awake, no, women hit a glass ceiling, minorities hit a glass ceiling. This is about the system and the oppression of the system. It's not about my competency. So being able to not internalize those moments when you hit things like that,
Wow.
can help you navigate it. The building community, building mentorship, that mentorship, like a really good solid mentor like I had with Pauline Clance, can really help navigate that. It normalizes it, making sure that you get clear messages about your worth and about your success. Yeah, there's so many new things that are blooming and blossoming. And what's really just exciting is that so many fields are interested in it. And like the research I just talked about, for example, is not with nurses, it's with pharmacists in New York, to postdocs in Utah. I mean, it's just like so many different places of artists and actresses and writers. The field has really bloomed.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, I was just thinking of writer when you said that. I was listening to, I think it was Neil Gaiman, the author, the writer, and his, like, I think he's doing a commencement speech for some school, and he literally mentioned having the fraud police coming, and he was afraid that was going to happen. So, yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it happened. Yeah, it's it really is kind of interesting how people aren't as afraid to say it, because they used to think saying it meant that it was true, right? And so and being able to talk about it does help dissipate it. I mean, it does take some of the power of it out. So that is a good thing.
And maybe just the changing of the times where people feel more comfortable talking about it.
Right. Which is a burden for men because they're kind of told not to talk about their feelings. Again, that those models of masculinity they have. And women are much better at building community. But then if you think about what do women have to do to succeed in business? Well, they have to act like men. They have to not talk about their feelings. So sometimes, I mean, I'm saying that as an overgeneralization. I don't think that's true that you have to do that. But I think that's how a lot of women have navigated it. And so sometimes the way you're coping with it is the opposite thing of what you need, because you need to build community, and you need to have people that see your worth as more than whatever that slice of achievement is, and people that can be liberal about your success. And we know that work cultures that are really competitive and really individualistic cultures and really competitive cultures create more of it, where everyone's hiding their failures. It's interesting, like a lot of the big Ivy League schools, they're taking the best of the best of high school, right? And they're getting to college and they've never had a failure experience. They truly exceed at everything. And so then when they hit a failure, when they hit that wall, it's like they don't know how to navigate it. And so they've started doing a lot of innovative programming, like they give out failure certificates, which is like this fabulous thing that this certifies you to completely botch an exam, and still be a utterly worthy human being, for example.
Oh, I like that.
Or putting a wall of failures, so that faculty are putting their rejections of their journal articles on because instead what typically happens is we hide those rejection letters. We don't talk about those rejection, the grant that didn't get funded, and so then the student just sees this faculty with this great grant and this great publication, and they're not realizing there were 20 failures before they got that, right? Yeah. So you're comparing your insides to somebody else's outsides, and it just it creates that it creates that culture that we all fail. Failing is human.
Yeah.
And it's part of learning. You learn about yourself. You learn you won't die. You learn that it's, you can survive it. You learn something about the task.
Yeah.
So, part of what can you do about it is about shifting your relationship to failure and not being so phobic about it. Go ahead and take the risk. Do the stretch.
Yeah.
Apply for that stretch job, because you learn something about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And totally makes sense. And I want to backtrack a little bit because you mentioned, and maybe we did talk about it, but I want to make sure you mentioned like this cycle, like the phenomenon cycle that one can experience.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Let me talk about that, because I think that's because these are smart people, right? And so it's like at some level you go, well, why can't you learn from your success that you're smart?
Yeah.
That seems like, what up with that, right? And so she got really interested in that. And so she did a lot of interviews with a lot of people, just kind of walking through what happens. And what she was finding is that, like, these are highly driven, achievement-oriented people. So when they get a task, oh, here's a new job, or here's a research opportunity, or whatever, there's that excitement, that thrill, because they're driven, right? But then right next to that yay is like, I'm not gonna, what if I can't do it? But then ultimately, these are people that have succeeded, right? So they've kind of stepped over that initial, and they go ahead and apply, submit their thing. And then the way they kind of get over that feeling, that negative, is they either do what I just talked about when I was talking about myself. They over prepare, or they, or what they do is they put it off. It's like, oh, that approaching that thing is making me nervous and doesn't feel good, and so I'm going to just kind of put it over there. And so they don't apply, and then it's the night before the grant's due, and then they stay up all night and do a Herculean effort to get it in, right? And so people tend to be kind of one way or the other. They either over preparers, or they're do it at the last minuters. And some people are mixtures. Sometimes I mix it up just to make myself really stressed, right? But we tend to do one or the other. Yeah. But again, these are people that actually do succeed. So then they get the grant, or they get the research article published, or they get the job, or whatever. And so then that reinforces their style. That success reinforces the over prepare. Oh, I have to prepare, or I work better under pressure. So I've got to stay up for 3 days with no sleep, and so that success, you feel good about that for a little while. It doesn't stay though, because you've got this self. Sorry, my
all good.
my noise. You have a self-concept that you're an imposter, and you have this success, and that doesn't go together. So that's something psychologists call cognitive dissonance. I'm sure you've heard it because you're in the field too, right? So that cognitive dissonance, you got to do something about that. How are you going to resolve it? Now, people that have imposter phenomenon, they resolve it by throwing away the data. They hold on to the self concept, and they throw away the data. And they throw it away with two ways. One is, if they over prepare, like I said before, they throw it away by saying, if I didn't over prepare, I would have flunked, and I would not have gotten it, and smart people wouldn't have to. Or if they do the last minute, they throw away the success by saying it was luck. I just happened to study the right thing at the last minute. So either with luck or kind of frame, that's how they throw the data away. So they can hold on to the self-concept. Not like anybody wants to do this, but that's what happens. And so then that self-concept stays. And then so now it's like, when am I going to get found out? And then it cycles. So then it cycles back. So that's how it stays. It remains. It's kind of like I said, it's kind of like a superstition. It remains because it never gets tested. Right. You never try to succeed any other way.
Yeah.
This way of working is like your fried chicken, it's like
Yeah.
your secret, it's your secret weapon, but you don't internalize it as that's a people who are smart, like, study hard. That's part of being smart, is that you work, that you
Right.
have to, or that the fact that you could pull it off with, luck happens. Luck does happen for sure. But these are people that have had sustained careers, right? So luck by definition isn't sustained, right? So it can't be luck if it keeps happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's so kind of knowing that uh, reframing your style that is part of that's part of the evidence that you do have talent,
Mm.
or that you do have intellect, or that you do have ability.
Yeah.
As opposed to kind of letting it be the way to throw away the success.
Mhm.
Does that answer the question about this?
Yeah. It also makes me lead into this next question, because I know part of your specialty is working with burnout. So just that, it's making me think of, oh, maybe this is where that fits in, this imposter phenomenon with burnout, because it's like overly preparing, or then like waiting last minute and like stressing yourself out to like do all this work. And is that
Yes,
where it kind of how it
yes,
presents
that is.
itself in your work?
It is absolutely. It's part of it, and also burnout is about the task is unachievable.
Mm.
So if you've got perfection as your measure of success, that's never achievable, right?
Mhm.
So if so that's the so that's another avenue. The other avenue is if the success is um, is confusing, like if you don't know from your boss exactly what is expected, and so you
Mm.
don't quite know, kind of how to, you know where you need to put your work, or where you need to put your effort. um, um, Burnout also happens with when there's low satisfaction, like when there's not a lot of uh, satisfaction in your work, not a lot of pleasure in your work. And if you've created such a treadmill of stress
Mm.
that you're not even enjoying it, you're dreading it, you're overworking, you're staying up all night for 4 days, you're exhausted, like that cycle of those styles of working take away the joy of why you do this job in the first place. So that's also kind of how they interact. But the pharmacy study that I'm doing is trying to kind of get some data on that interaction.
Mm.
But theoretically, they, like you said, they do fit.
Yeah.
But we haven't quite had the scales of burnout and scales of imposter phenomenon with the same people to see kind of how that relationship plays out.
Interesting. And I'm asking some people, but I really want your take, considering you're still researching all of this and work with Dr. Clance. Do you think social media and kind of like this whole tech based society that we're in now, do you think it impacts this phenomenon at all?
Yeah, I think we do know social comparisons do,
Mm.
and I don't know if there's any worse platform than social media to do that,
Yeah.
because you're looking at, again, you've got your failures and your mistakes, but you're comparing it to somebody who just put the good stuff out there on their Facebook, on their web post or whatever. And so it's really easy to think that somebody else doesn't have the failure experience, doesn't have the struggle, doesn't have the doubt, doesn't have, because they're not posting that. They're posting the there's some individual factors that sort of set you up for this phenomenon. One of them is ironically being really intelligent, because when you're intelligent, there's something called the what is it called? The blank on the Dunner-Kruger effect, I think,
Mm.
where once you know something, then that's easy.
Mm.
So once you know it, you don't feel like it's anything to know it, because that's easy. It's that next thing that's hard, right? And so like the writer, who might be a fabulous writer, thinks it's the scientist, it's the that's the real, so whatever you do, whatever you're able to do, you kind of downplay, and it's always the next thing. And so social media kind of helps you kind of have access to, oh, what they're doing. Oh, I should have thought of that, and it downplays what you have done.
Yeah.
Um, Perfectionism sets you up for it if you're a perfectionistic. If you're a psychologist called neurotic, which sort of means like you worry a lot. And also, if you're introverted, you have a little more of it than if you're extroverted. Because if you're introverted, you think deep, you kind of think deeply about yourself and about your capacities. And extroverts tend to get a little more social support out there sometimes, and will share their thoughts as opposed, and so they can get, oh, I think I feel that way too. And but an introvert might keep that in. So introversion tends to go along with, and these are correlations, they're not causing, because you can't design studies to make these things happen, but they're correlated. So those individual factors are pretty highly correlated.
Yeah. And you kind of touched upon it a little bit here and there, but let's kind of focus now like on solutions. Yeah, like people who are kind of having all these like different perfectionist or comparison or all these various things that they're doing. How can someone start shifting out of this?
Right.
Out of this phenomenon.
Well, I think one thing is shifting your relationship to failure. And that comes from taking risk, going ahead and taking the risk, getting a failure experience and realizing I'm okay. I learned something about the task for next time. I learned something about myself. Hey, I'm not really good at that. I don't have to go to networking parties if I'm not good at networking parties, right? The knowing that that intellect and capacity is so multifaceted. Like, you can be a fabulous idea generator, but a really bad get it across the finish line person, right? Or you can be really good at connecting things, but not as good at statistics. I mean, you don't have to be just because you're not good at one thing. So honest self-assessments, like where you are, I'm not good at that, and that's okay, because I'm good at this, and not being good at that doesn't mean I'm not good at this. That there's a and if there is something I'm not good at, is there something I need? Do I need to go get a class in statistics? Do I need to go get a tutor? Can I hire somebody to do that thing that I'm not good at? So honest self-assessments, and build the things that are really kind of necessary for your life. Or just accepting the things, you don't have to be good at all things, right? There's changing your, I'm going to talk about attribution theory in a minute, so I'm going to skip over that, but you got to change your relationship to successes too. So like when you, and watch your language, like women are particularly bad at, I might be wrong, but or you might disagree with this, but these qualifiers, or they say something and at the end they do a tag that's like, oh, that's just probably just stupid. Or it could be, like, watch that language, look at your emails and edit those things out, because we start to believe the narratives that we speak. There are literally neural networks that get created if we always say negative things. And so start saying positive things, start editing those out, and they're not needed. Reframing your work style, I think we've already talked about that. I think there's also some value in the priming effect, where you you're a hypnotherapist, right? So where you visualize your successes, you visualize making the jump shot, increases basketballs, sinking it at the line, because that visualization helps. So visualize your success. Have a lot of people call it different things, smile file, boulder folder, where you put all these, you were fabulous in one place. And so you review that. Every letter of reference, you review those before you go into something that's challenging. So you're priming yourself about your successes before it increases your performance. But let's talk about attribution theory, because I think that's where the nuts and bolts of it are. And sometimes that's a little harder to do on your own, but there's everybody has negative things happen, and everybody has positive things happen. Everybody has failures, everybody has successes. And if a negative thing happens and you attribute it to your internal factors, mm-hmm. It's me, and it's global, and it's permanent. That's got IP all over it. If instead, if a negative thing happens, like a failure, you maybe externalize it, like this is a good old boys network, and they're going to hire a white man, and I'm a black female, and that's what that gives it a context, right? So make sure that you remember the context for negative things, or maybe it's a negative thing like I didn't pass my defense on my thesis. Because I wasn't really good at statistics. Okay, well, that's specific. I can learn statistics. I can go get tutoring on that. But it doesn't mean I'm globally a failure student. It's a specific thing. So to really challenge yourself to, when it's negative, to look at external causes and specific things that are temporal, that could be changed over time. And so that's sort of like getting a Teflon on your negative stuff to let the negative stuff slide off, right? The reverse has to happen when it's a good thing. So you get an A, right? You get an A plus on your paper. If you've got IP, you're gonna say, oh, it was an easy test. You're gonna make an external, but no, challenge yourself. No, I got an A plus because I'm good at this, and make it global, and make it permanent. I actually have been getting A's all of my life. Maybe that's about me. But so challenging these are the causes of the good things and the bad things in your life when they happen, because we tend to do it one way or another. And if we can challenge ourselves, again, like I said, sometimes that's hard to do. That's why the mentor comes in, the therapist comes in, the best friend that can challenge you comes in, because sometimes they're just so automatic that you don't realize you're even doing it.
Yeah, I like that attribution theory. Interesting.
Attribution theory, yeah. Right? And then as far as to decrease it, as far as the context. So that's kind of some individual things you could do. Staying woke to messaging, right? So when you know, that's sexist. That's a racist comment. That's a homophobic comment. So you're not taking that in, like, as it's about you, like staying woke to that. And the ways you can stay, it's like staying meta to the stuff. Part of that is building community. So like if you're in a male dominated STEM field, for example, women in STEM we're still way underrepresented, right? Get a group of women that you meet with. If it's not inside your university, then use the media, the social media, to find those networks, because they can help you stay awake to that message and not let it get in. The other thing would be, making a balance. We get more impact when we're down, when we're empty, when we're depleted. So making sure that your work-life balance is where it needs to be, so that if you get something negative, you've got something else to hold. If all of your esteem is in one area and you get a failure experience, then it can feel much bigger than it would be if you also, love this creative thing that you're doing, or love this family thing that you're doing. So that that can kind of help you. So balance helps a lot. And then I really would encourage people to start a revolution about this. Change the messaging we give our little boys. Change the messaging we give our little girls. Change, if you have a student, if you're, tell your student about your failures. Create an environment where where we talk about that just as much as we talk about our successes. Because it really does survive and thrive in these really competitive, individualistic places. And we don't have to live those ways. We don't have to create environments like that. We don't have to create families like that. Let your kids know that they are, their success is not what their value is.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because it's not said enough. It's not said enough. I mean, is there anything else that I might not have touched upon that you want to add, or?
No, Pauline and I are working on a workbook for this very thing, so that people can have a guide to kind of do it on their own. I mean, I think a lot of it is helpful to work with a therapist sometimes, but I also know a lot of people, A, can't access therapy, or B, don't want to. And so we're going to be putting out a workbook to kind of have some pragmatic suggestions on how to work through some of this stuff. So.
Yeah, please keep me posted on that.
I will. I
can advertise it. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, work with you personally, or learn more about your work that you're doing, where can they get in touch with you?
I have a .com. It's www.suzannelawry.com. So the trick about my .com is that I don't have an E on the end of my name. My mom didn't. She had Anns in her life, and none of them have an E on the end. So mine doesn't, which was fabulous because I got to have a .com. So it's SUZANNLAWRY.com.
Excellent. I just want to thank you again for being on the show. This is great. Thank you.
It was nice meeting you. Take care. Good luck to you. I'm glad you're doing it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Bye now.